Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha TV. You're watching Discussion Today with your host, Kriti Mishra. The Supreme Court has observed that personal likes and dislikes are not material to the protection of someone's constitutional rights. If his or her personal liberty has been unfairly violated, then he or she deserves to get bail. The Indian judiciary is vested with powers to protect under Articles 32 and 226 in the form of writs and public interest litigation. Chief Justice of India, S.A. Bobde, has said that the Supreme Court was trying to discourage people from approaching it with petitions filed under Article 32. Now, Article 32 falls under Part 3 of Constitution that includes the fundamental rights of individuals. It allows an individual to approach the Supreme Court if he or she believes that her or his fundamental rights have been violated or they need to be enforced. And to get a perspective on this, we are joined by Mr. Kapil Sankla. He is advocate in the Supreme Court of India, and also by Mr. Satyaprakash. He is the legal editor with the Tribune. Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kapil, let me come to you first. Now,
Sure.
Article 21 or personal liberty is sacrosanct in Constitution. What are the aspects and provisions under the Constitution enforcing personal liberty?
Priti, there are two aspects to it. In fact, there are two articles which are very important. Article 20, which protects you from wrongful conviction, and Article 21, that of course safeguards your liberty. Now, these are your fundamental rights, and fundamental rights are basically the protective mechanism for every citizen that proves and shows that we are a democratic society, that the personal liberty is sacrosanct, that you cannot be, punished, forced into, or thrown in jail for no reasons whatsoever. And you're absolutely right when you said that to protect your fundamental rights, should there be an infringement on those fundamental rights, you can, of course, go to the High Court or the Supreme Court under 226 for High Court and 32 in Supreme Court. Now, these protective mechanisms are there in case of any infringement of fundamental rights by any department, including police department. And in that, one of the most important writs that protects a person's liberty is a writ called the writ of habeas corpus. Habeas corpus basically means bring the body or show the body. In case a person is wrongfully incarcerated, taken away by police or any other government department, he himself or any person who is in the know or family members can move a writ called the writ of habeas corpus. Now, this writ can be filed under Section Article 226 for any of the High Courts, or under Article 32 straight away to the Supreme Court. Though the Honorable Supreme Court in a number of judgments has deprecated the practice of going to Supreme Court directly and has only accepted habeas corpus directly under exceptional circumstances when some reason is shown why the person hasn't gone to High Court before. Now, there are other writs also, but there are 5 writs in fact, but those are not really relevant to the question here. What has happened is that in case of any person being incarcerated, habeas corpus is moved. The High Courts themselves at certain stages have been lax at allowing a habeas corpus petition, saying that there is an equally efficacious remedy of bail once one gets to know that the person has been incarcerated in jail under a particular FIR. Now, the Honorable Supreme Court, though you rightly said, has deprecated the practice of moving a writ, but in various cases, in the present cases that we are aware of, and in other cases, also come down strongly on police officers where they've infringed a person's liberty or given a go-by to the fundamental rights or various judgments. There is a judgment called the D.K. Basu judgment that is also sacrosanct, that actually protects how a person will be arrested, under what circumstances, and when he's arrested, what will be done. His family members will be informed. The person will be given informed the reason of his arrest. A copy of the FIR will be provided to him. All that safety mechanisms have been put. But if there is an infringement, then the only mechanism that you have is to move a writ to the High Court or to the Supreme Court. And so Article 20, Article 21, and the protective mechanism is under Article 226 for High Court, 32 for Supreme Court, and the writ that you would move is the writ of habeas corpus.
But Kapil, I'd also like to understand this specifically. Now, as you said, that detention is infringement of an individual's right to life or even liberty. So what are the rights of an individual in case of unlawful detention or arrest?
Oh, that's a very good question. Now, the Honorable Supreme Court laid down a diktat, a law, said bail, not jail. Now, this is a very, very old judgment in 1980s, etc. And it actually comes from various other judgments. And the whole idea was that if a person, there is no reason to incarcerate a person, then a person should not be incarcerated only to punish him. And therefore, bail should be given. Now, there are many judgments. They say that judgments are dual-edged swords. So every judgment that you find, you also find an opposite judgment. That's unfortunate, but that's the truth. So there are also various judgments that say that in cases of heinous offences, bail should not be given because there could be threat to the witnesses, there could be tampering of evidence, the person could abscond, etc. In cases of financial crime, the courts have held that it tears the economic fabric of the society and the country, and therefore such people should not be given bail. I unfortunately cannot, as a defense lawyer, stand by and accept that ruling, because I believe that the fundamental rights have been put there for a reason. And the fact that the fundamental rights cannot be taken away or easily taken away have been there for a reason. And the reason is this, that liberty of a person is fundamental to the democracy of the country. When you talk about whether we are a developed society or not, whether we are enlightened society or not, it can only be decided if we value a person's life and a person's liberty, if you do not shortchange it. And it is very easy. And since I represent usually politicians and industrialists and all of that, I say this to a number of people, that it's very easy to be vicariously be pleased. That's a middle class mentality where I come from as well. Vicariously pleased when you see a high and mighty, thrown behind bars for a month or 15 days or 5 days. It gives a certain joy that law is equal. But what I say is that in such a case, you have to remember that that judgment has now become a precedent. And that precedent is going to percolate down and go down to the lowest strata of the society. And when you talk about the high and mighty or the people who are connected or rich or powerful, they still will come out on bail because they have deep roots in the society. They can say that they will not tamper with the evidence. They will give their passport, they will surrender their passport, etc. But when it comes to the lower economic strata, they are the ones who actually suffer when laws are passed or judgments are created or precedents are made which go against the very fabric of liberty. So when you talk about a person's liberty, when you talk about the judgments that are there, I wish that we actually come to a society where the diktat of the court that bail not jail be actually given credence to, that there should be no reason to arrest a person. Let me tell you something very interesting. The Honorable Supreme Court realized that the police officers have a huge hand, have a very wide brush to paint a person and arrest him, and therefore made an amendment to the law. This amendment is called the Amendment of Section 41A. This is in the CRPC. The basic concept was that in any offense where the punishment is 7 years or less, a police officer cannot come and arrest a person just like that. He will send a notice under Section 41A. If the accused complies with Section 41A, he will not be arrested. Now, this was a beautiful process that was created by Supreme Court so that your liberty would be protected. Now, what do police officers ended up doing? They send a notice under 41A. A person approaches the police officer. He sits in the thana. The police officer changes the section, adds on certain sections where the punishment is beyond 7 years, and arrests the person. Or a complaint is filed under offences which are 7 years or less, and the moment a person moves a bail, they change the sections and make higher offences, and the offences are 10 years and plus, and therefore 41A is given go by to. Now, unfortunately,
well, absolutely, that's a very important point that you're making, and you're talking also about whether it will serve as a precedent or not. I'll just elicit your views on that one. But Mr. Satyaprakash, it is also said that personal liberty as a concept is open to individual interpretation, and then the question of equality before law, that gains currency.
Well, question of equality before law is guaranteed under Article 14, and that cannot be changed. Theoretically speaking, that's the correct position, but the Supreme Court, as Kapil has pointed out, in many cases, the Supreme Court is not one Supreme Court. Unlike the US Supreme Court or some other Supreme Courts, Indian Supreme Court sits in several benches. Like US Supreme Court, all the 9 judges will sit together and give one verdict, maybe by 5-4 or something like that. But in India, there are 34 Supreme Court judges. Currently, there are 34 vacancies are there. But they sit in benches, generally 2-judge or 3-judge benches, and sometimes constitution benches are 5-7. The problem is sometimes the Supreme Court benches, a 2-judge bench has given one verdict, identical facts and circumstances, some other 2-judge bench has given a different verdict. So it becomes sort of conflicting judgments are there, and then sometimes the matter is referred to a larger bench of 3-judge bench, and then by the time the law is settled by a larger bench, and sometimes it will go to a 5-judge bench or 7-judge bench, by the time some individuals who are victims of certain procedural inaccuracies or the way the police they implement the law, they have already suffered suffered under some police officer. The idea of having civil liberties is not, then it gets defeated. The ideal situation would be the Supreme Court in all such cases, and I am saying it with all responsibility, because there are lots of cases. Every now and then we come to a case where the Supreme Court has referred it to a larger bench. So it will go to a larger bench. By that time, thousands of people will suffer at the hands of the law. The ideal situation would be the Supreme Court should examine all such cases, and it should be, instead of sending it to a 2 or 3 judge bench, because there is no separate branch in the Supreme Court which analyzes judgments like this. Unless and until some litigant has gone to the court and pointed it out that, look, you have given this verdict in similar circumstances and now you are giving some other verdict, then it will go to a larger bench. There is no mechanism available with the Supreme Court on its own. They don't analyze their own judgments, and it has to be essentially by some litigant to be pointed out that there is some sort of contradiction in Supreme Court verdicts. So because of this, the structural problem, because Supreme Court sits in benches of 2 judges or 3 judges. So till the time this is sorted out, you will have this kind of problem, because Supreme Court is not one Supreme Court. I have come across judgments where in identical cases, the Supreme Court used Article 142, that is their extraordinary power to dispense justice, where they can give a go-by to some procedural requirements or some requirements of law. They have given contradictory verdict in identical set of facts. So this problem is with the Supreme Court, and if this is the problem with the Supreme Court, you can imagine the problem with various high courts. One high court giving some other verdict, some other different high court giving other verdict. If the law is settled at the level of the Supreme Court on such issues, there will be uniformity in implementation of the law.
Well, absolutely. Again, you're making a very legit point there, and let me take it to Kapil. Kapil, the problem arises when there is non-application of this rule of upholding civil liberties across different courts of India. What happens then?
First of all, I would really thank Mr. Satya. Wonderful point raised, something that we as lawyers have not really thought of. And I think it is extremely valid, and I hope that this would be taken credence to by the Honorable Supreme Court. Very, very valid point. Thank you. As far as your question is concerned, you see, the difficulty that we are facing as a country is that though the courts are doing justice to the best of their abilities, they are stuck with the evidence that is brought forth by the investigating agencies. And the investigating agencies are either not sensitive to the liberties, or they are not knowledgeable, or they give a go-by to the judgments and the procedures as laid down by the courts. The difficulty we as lawyers face is that though we are aware of the law, though we can bring that law before the investigating agency, but the investigating agency will give a go-by to it and give a blind eye to it till the time the matter goes to the court. The reason is because that investigating officer or the agency is not held accountable and responsible. Yes. Their job, according to them, is only to arrest a person and to create a case. Their job is not to dispense justice or to help justice. The difficulty is that they have not been made accountable to false arrests, false evidence, and false cases. And therefore, they believe somewhere down the line that they are either mightier than the judiciary or that they are protected by judiciary and judicial judgments, and therefore they would escape. Also, the officers are not made liable for such false evidences, false arrest, or false cases. When they are made personally liable, I am very sure that the dispensation of justice for which the entire processes have been created and investigating agencies have been created would be done rather than creating false arrests and giving a go-by to personal liberties of human beings.
Let me take that to Satyaprakash. Satyaprakash, as Kapil says, the question is of accountability. So how do we make them accountable?
Well, one way is to change the entire system. We follow the adversarial system where the police and the prosecution, they prepare the case and present before the court. In inquisitorial system, which is followed in most countries in continental Europe, including France, the judge would himself or herself take part in the investigation itself. So investigation and collection of evidence at that very stage, there is judicial intervention. And that ensures that any hanky-panky on the part of the police is ruled out. So I don't know, because this requires a complete change. I don't know whether we are ready for that or not, because to have a police system which is not very fair and which is not well trained in the culture of rights and liberties, we have a colonial legacy where police was used to as a brute force to suppress the Indian people and the freedom movement. That legacy is still existing. So I don't know whether we are ready for that kind of change or not. But if you follow the inquisitorial system, mostly followed in continental Europe, where judges can take part in the investigation itself. So they are part of the collection of evidence. So at that stage itself, if they find that a particular person is not involved and there is hardly anything against a particular person, just for the heck of it, the person will not be arrested and implicated in the case. And there, when they are actually filing the charge sheet or bringing the case for trial, they have proper judicial scrutiny before that. And that ensures that innocent people are not falsely implicated in the case. But we follow a completely different system, an adversarial system, where the police will do the investigation. On their behalf, prosecution will present the case in the court. And then adversarial system means the judges are completely neutral. Whatever evidence is brought on record by both the sides, they will sit neutral and judge it on the basis of what is presented before them. They don't take active part in the collection of evidence, or even during the trial. They are generally sitting idle, and whatever is presented to them, they will assess that and accordingly give the verdict. There is a case for inquisitorial system. If not complete switchover, some elements of that system can be adopted and replicated in India.
Absolutely. So we are talking about the structural reforms. But Kapil, again, the moot question remains, how will the Apex Court ensure that there is consistency in upholding the civil liberties across different courts?
Priti, may I just add on another point from what was being argued?
Please go ahead, sir.
You see, there's another thing that is there which is a laxity in our system, which requires correction. The police, once they investigate the matter, they file their investigation report before the court to say whether a case is made out or not made out, which is called the charge sheet. And you will be shocked to know that this is the first time the court applies its judicial mind to the case at hand, which is called taking cognizance of the case. Now, what is shocking is that there is no onus or duty on the police officer to bring the complete and absolute evidence that he's collected before the court or before the accused. He is duty bound to find only that evidence that he believes is going to take his case forward. How is that fair? Not only are you hiding evidence that you have that you know can help the accused from the accused, but also from the court. And therefore, the court will now go on the surmise that the entire evidence, whatever has been collected by the police, is sacrosanct truth and nothing else exists, and go through a long drawn trial only in the end to have the defense bring that evidence that the police officer has hidden. And there is absolutely nothing that you can do against that investigating officer, investigating agency, because that is what the law is and has been held by the Honorable Supreme Court. So that is something that requires a change. And it is called the concept of fair disclosure, that the investigating agencies are duty bound to fairly disclose all the evidence that they have garnered, that they have, not only to the court, but also to the opposite party, to the accused, because their job is not to seek a conviction under all circumstances, but to unearth the truth and to investigate the matter to the best of their ability. So that is something that
another
I wanted
important
to add.
aspect is Article 32. Now, CJI has said that Supreme Court of India is discouraging petitions under Article 32. Help us understand, what does Article 32 entail?
All right. So our fundamental rights, which are enshrined in the Constitution, are supposed to be sacrosanct. They cannot be taken away. They cannot be given a go-by to. Now, the only way a common citizen can ensure that the government complies with those fundamental rights are by seeking redressal, by moving either to High Court or Supreme Court. And the process by which they go is called the process of writ, that you file a writ. A writ is like a mandate or a whip that the High Court or the Supreme Court exerts on government officials, not on private parties, for compliances and to respect and honor fundamental rights. So there could be a writ of mandamus, there could be a writ of certiorari, there could be a writ of prohibition, habeas corpus. These are various writs. The writs that are moved before the High Court are under Article 226. The writs which can be moved before the Honorable Supreme Court are writs under Article 32. Now, the scope of the Supreme Court is very narrow under Article 32. They can only seek compliances of fundamental rights and nothing more. The powers of the High Court are much vast under Article 226, because not only fundamental rights, but for all just and equitable cause to see whether the government officials are doing their duty, etc., are being compliant, and the compliances are taking place or not. So this is the difference between Article 226, powers of the High Court, and Article 32, powers of the Supreme Court. The Honorable Supreme Court deprecates this practice. You have to understand that the number of cases that go all the way to Supreme Court are so huge, so humongous, that matters are pending for 10, 12, 15 years before they come up for hearing. And for no fault of the Honorable Supreme Court, it's just the sheer volume of matters that come. So the Honorable Supreme Court deprecates the practice of every citizen moving under Article 32 straight to Supreme Court without any just cause or reason. Because the High Courts have been created, they are the head of every state, they've been created to take care of any issues that come in that jurisdiction of that state, and you can move straight to High Court. There has to be a very valid reason why you are giving a go-by to one of the levels or one of the stages or one of the ladders of going under Article 226 to the High Court and coming straight away to the Supreme Court. I am in agreement with the Honorable Supreme Court when it says that this practice should be deprecated of people coming straight away to Honorable Supreme Court under Article 32, unless there is a valid reason. It could be a reason where you're questioning the very state, the powers of the state to such a level that you believe that you will not get justice in the High Court, where there could be a political compulsion or a writ that takes care of multiple states and multiple issues, and therefore it is incumbent on a party to come straight away to the Supreme Court to show whether that there is no chance that he will get a relief by only one High Court. So there could be various
Absolutely.
reasons.
So there has to be a valid reason saying that there is malified intention on the part of the other stakeholders. But before we end this show, Satyaprakash, another important judgment that I'd like to bring to the cognizance of our viewers is a recent Supreme Court judgment wherein it said that irrespective of the merits of the case, the accused is liable to get default or compulsive bail if the investigating agency doesn't complete the probe within the stipulated time period. What will be the implication of this judgment?
Well, that's the basic provision of CRPC. Default bail, it's a basic provision under CRPC. Section, Kapil would help me on this.
41.
37 or 67, 267 something. There is a basic provision under...
Consider default bail 60 days or 90 days? Yes.
Yes. So depending upon the offense, certain cases 60 days time is given for investigation, in certain other cases 90 days given. And if the investigating agency fails to file the final report within that stipulated period, and final report could be charge sheet or a closure report, then the accused is entitled for default bail. And the court has simply clarified the legal position on that. There is nothing new about it. This is a basic provision under CRPC, which was generally ignored by many courts. So Supreme Court has simply reminded them of this. A couple of points I would like to add to what Kapil has said about Article 32. Indian Supreme Court, it's not like American Supreme Court or British Supreme Court, which was created almost 10 years ago. They deal with hardly between 60 to 70 or 70 plus cases in a year. Unlike them, Indian Supreme Court, each bench would deal with 70 cases every day. So Supreme Court is already overburdened. Yes. If a particular matter can be handled by a high court, and it's not that if you file an Article 206 petition, your option of going to the Supreme Court is closed. I am in all agreement with the Supreme Court on this point, but the Supreme Court should apply a similar yardstick to Article 136, which is the main reason for flooding of the Supreme Court and overcrowding of the Supreme Court. Because in almost every case, you will find that somebody has filed SLP. SLP was not meant to be a normal routine route available for litigants to go to the Supreme Court against any order of the High Court or any other judicial or quasi-judicial forum. They are not very circumspect on Article 136, and they are allowing a huge number of 136 petitions, which is the main reason for clogging of the Supreme Court entire system. They should apply a similar yardstick to Article 136. And that will help to decongest the Supreme Court. And I'm not saying that Supreme Court should not be allowing 136 or 32 petitions. They should hear it. But the way they are talking about Article 32, some sort of scrutiny has to be there for 136 petitions also. And if they do that, they will end up decongesting the Supreme Court.
Right, absolutely. So we can infer that personal liberty is sacrosanct, and also the fact that there is need to reduce pendency in the cases. Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us, Kapil and Satyaprakash. It was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
So that's all we had for you in this edition of Discussion Today. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Rajya Sabha Television.
Defeat coronavirus. Let us always remember